This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwallpod.
Hello and welcome to episode 484 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund signing Pascal Groß from Brighton and Hove Albion. And for that, I'm joined by no other than Jonathan Harding. Bundesliga fans may know him from Talking Fußball or many other exploits. He is one of the OGs when it comes to the football German Twitter scene, if you will. Jonathan, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. How are you doing?
Thank you for that intro. Yeah, one of the OGs, making me feel old here, at least in English.
You are.
Yeah, I'm old. Yeah, look, hey, I'm excited to be able to chat to you because it's been too long, but I'm sad the reason that we're chatting is because Pascal Groß is no longer playing for Brighton. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was a perfect segue. Speaking of old dudes, because Pascal Groß is 33 years old. And I must admit, I know very little about him other than that he grew up as a Dortmund fan, apparently. He is from Mannheim. He is 1.81 m, and he is a central midfielder. I do recall him playing for Ingolstadt back in the day.
Yes.
And tormenting Dortmund during that time. But yeah, he has been with Brighton for quite a while, I assume. For how long was he actually there?
I think he signed 17, 18. So since then, so I think 7-8 years, something like that.
And this is why I got you on here. I hope that he is sort of one of the Königstransfers for Dortmund. Jonathan, what can Dortmund fans expect hearing that you were sad to see him leave? I assume that's a positive.
Yeah, look, he leaves a club legend. When he arrived, I think very few people knew nothing very much about him. He came, I think, for a very small fee, something like 3 or 4 million. Wasn't very much, and everyone was like, Ingolstadt, who's this? Who is this guy? I think people thought he could be a role player, but he's left an absolute club legend. I mean, look at the reaction of Brighton captain Lewis Dunk, who said, you've left as a legend. He's been an integral player in Brighton's rise and staying power, basically, in the Premier League. He's been one of the reasons that we have established ourselves as a Premier League club, which is ridiculous for many Brighton fans who are in my age range, because they'll remember us being a third division team. He's played a really huge role in that. What can Dortmund fans expect? Well, I think there are a couple of interesting aspects here. Look, you mentioned it at the top, being old. He's 33. So I think from a Brighton perspective, it felt like it was an acceptable time to let him go. Plus, we tend to be quite good as a club of like recognizing when people have reached the end of their time. It's a boyhood dream for him to play for Dortmund. Everybody wins here. We had 7 or 8 great years with him. Thanks very much. But I think at 33, what's interesting for me here is that it feels like the kind of transfer that really only has 2 years. Like, you probably only have 18 months, max 24 of the best version of Pascal Groß before he drops off. And I say that not because I don't think he has the longevity to play for longer, but I think the way that he plays just merely dictates that he probably doesn't have any more years than 2 in the tank. Now, that suggests to me that Dortmund want to win something in the next 2 years, which is maybe a very refreshing thing to hear from a Dortmund perspective. I don't know. You are the better placed one to answer that. But I think signing a player like Pascal Groß suggests to me that there's a bit more urgency about Dortmund's proceedings. Yeah, you've listed the players there that haven't quite delivered in midfield. That obviously helps. I think Pascal Groß is a starter, even at 33. He played in so many different positions for us that I think the versatility is not to be forgotten. Not that I think he's a utility player for Dortmund, but what those positions do is that they create a skill set that is much broader. So he's comfortable playing right back. He's comfortable playing 6. He's comfortable playing 8. He's even comfortable playing 10. So now you've got 4 different positions that he could play, and he knows how to play all of them. So he knows all of the knowledge and the skills and the positions, that required to do so. So ultimately, I think you're getting a deep-lying playmaker who has a fantastic eye for the final pass. I think anyone who's watched some of Germany's games where he's featured would have seen that. Anyone who's watched any Brighton games would have noticed that he's that kind of player. He has really a fantastic ability to unlock at the right moment. But he also arrives with a vast amount of experience in, quote, the best league in the world. That's not to be dismissed.
Well, he did play for Ingolstadt, so yes.
Hey, yeah, look, we're talking about these Ingolstadt years now. Look, for the record, I don't think the Premier League is the best league in the world, but there is no disputing the fact that 260-odd games for Brighton at that level brings a level of experience that I think a lot of players in this Dortmund team just don't have. And that matters. And I think the combination of that with his skill set in the deep-lying role, I think there's a player that offers something that Dortmund don't have there at the moment. So,
yeah, that is very much correct. Well analyzed. It pains me to say that, but it's really been a while. I mean, I will always say we've never really managed to replace Ilkay Gündoğan. I mean, Gonzalo Castro was maybe sometimes, on his good or better days, sort of a connective piece. But what made me perk up in the little interview that Pascal Groß gave to Borussia Dortmund's own YouTube channel or whatever is that, when he was asked to describe himself in his own playing style, within a few sentences, he said that sort of my skill or sort of the first quality mentioned that he wants to make his teammates around him better and put them into action. And this is, like I said, where I perk up, because I feel like if there's been something missing for Dortmund in the midfield, it's really the number 8 that connects right in the heart of midfield. Someone that can receive the ball, turn around with it, and then find a pass, see the space, these sort of things. So if Pascal Groß has the ability to do that, and that is more or less the only reason why you're on here, to answer in a yes or no style whether he has that ability, because that's all I personally want to know. Can he play the Hollywood pass, but also just can he do a 180 with the ball from back to goal to front of goal when he receives that pass, and then do something with it, especially since Dortmund now have lost Mats Hummels. Build-up play will need to come from somewhere else. So, Jonathan, once again, is this one of his key abilities, or where would you say his key abilities lie? Because, as you just hinted at, he apparently is also a very proficient runner.
He is, yeah. I think you're right, though. His best ability is absolutely unlocking defenses, finding the best ball, the Hollywood pass, as you say. I think, he is a player who is... One of the reasons I think Brighton fans love him so much is that he was regularly unselfish. And I think that's a very endearing trait, especially for a midfielder, especially for a playmaker. Because not only are you playing to your strengths, but you're also constantly putting the team first. And I think a lot of players in Brighton's team over the last few years would not have been as successful, wouldn't have had their opportunities without him being present. And honestly, I think if you ask most Brighton fans over the last 10 years, if it were not for Lewis Dunk, the captain, I think most people would say that Pascal Groß has been the most influential player in that team. And I think that speaks highly of his playing style, but also the way that he's just been a part of that community and that team in that time. So yes, the short answer is he absolutely can play that pass. He absolutely can turn things around, has the vision to look up. My only question mark, as I say, is how long has he got it left? Because I think from a very shrewd business perspective, Brighton were very happy to say farewell at 33 for a price, I think, which ended up, I don't know, reportedly being more than what we paid for him. So that's a pretty good...
Yeah, 7 million euros is the reported figure.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good return on a player who you absolutely, in my opinion, have got the best years from. And it suggests to me that Dortmund, they need to get it right in the next 2 years, because quite frankly, look, I don't think that Pascal Groß, based on the way that he plays, he's also, like I said, not just finding the pass, he can absolutely lead or dictate the press, the way that he runs so much. He's a very smart player, so he'll understand how to make that work. But yes, with all the changes of what becomes an average age or how long careers can last in modern football, that's obviously extended. I still think that 35 is probably the limit for him. So you're looking at a very short window in which to get the best out of him. Great, enjoy it. I hope he plays as well for you as he has for us over the last few years. But I think, putting my I've watched Dortmund over the last few years hat on, my biggest fear would be that he plays well and Dortmund get it together as he starts to drop off. And that would be a terrible waste because there is a really, really smart player in there.
Well, I don't want to ring the "it's always a transitional year" klaxon for Dortmund, but I keep saying it always is, because Dortmund are always in flux. Either you have the best player leaving, like being Haaland or Bellingham, etc., or you are recovering from a bad season or whatever. I mean, this is obviously a big transition year for Dortmund, regardless of whether they are new players or not. Just because there's a new coach, there's a new CEO Sport with Ricken, there's a new, squad planner with Mislintat, new old, if you will, and Sebastian Kehl obviously is still finding his feet as well. So even if he's the same guy, I'm sure he is adapting his style of work consistently too. So from that perspective, a lot is happening, and obviously Dortmund are making a lot of moves this off season. I mean, they have to make up for the losses of the legend. When we talk about legends, I think Marco Reus certainly falls into that category, and we've discussed it before. For me, Mats Hummels is also definitely a Borussia Dortmund legend. So having to replace those guys is not going to be easy. But yeah, what I wanted to talk with you a little bit is team chemistry, because obviously there will be a few new faces. We've talked about Guirassy, obviously Waldemar Anton. Now there's going to be a new right back too, with Kauto, I think is how you pronounce him, on his way in. Still pending a medical, and we know these things are automatic these days. But there will obviously also be established players around him, like Julian Brandt. I assume for now that the likes of Malen and Adeyemi will be also around Pascal Groß in midfield, and I don't know who he's going to be pairing up with in midfield and what Nuri Sahin's sort of preferred system is, whether it's going to be a double pivot or not. All variables I can't really answer right now, but nevertheless, Jonathan, you know Dortmund pretty well too, because I know you've watched them relatively frequently. So if you look at the current squad, how do you think he's going to link up, and with whom do you think he's going to link up best?
I think the obvious answer is Julian Brandt. I think that there's a natural chemistry there. I think they know each other a little bit from Germany squads. I think certainly the games before the Euros. I know that Brandt wasn't involved, but in the Euros itself. But I know that I think they were in a squad before. I think that there's also just a little bit of similar wavelength kind of player there. I think Julian Brandt at his best is the kind of player that can be on the end of Pascal Groß passes. Brandt obviously has that playmaking ability as well. But not only do I think he would work well with him, but I actually think that Julian Brandt could be the biggest beneficiary from Pascal Groß's arrival. I think it could be the kind of thing that flips a lot of people's perception of Brandt, where I think some people are still on the fence. Is he great? Is he as good as we thought he'd be? Sometimes he has these ups and downs. I think he's a phenomenal footballer. But I think that Pascal Groß's playing style has the ability to take Brandt maybe to a little bit more of a consistent level, or at least offer him the opportunity to be more consistent. But you're right. Look, I think Sahin has some big decisions to make. I think, how do you want to set up such a versatile player in a team that is still lacking in some of those other areas? Do we feel that Borussia Dortmund have a strong enough base in midfield to be able to say to Pascal Groß, you could play in a slightly more offensive 8? Or are we still willing to say, look, I need you to play 6 and we'll play someone next to you like Emre Can who just tackles and you can do the rest? Also a possibility. I'm not a football coach for many reasons. Nuri Sahin has to make that decision. But I think where Pascal would be most effective is absolutely in the middle. So yes, it could be a 6, but when I say 6, I don't mean like a 6 in a 4-2-3-1. I don't mean someone deep. I actually also, I mean someone more like in the middle of the field. So kind of somewhere between a 6 and an 8. I think that's where he played most of his games for us, in that sort of in-between position. I think if you have him too deep, you potentially lose some of his quality in the final third. But you could offset that if Julian Brandt is playing in that role ahead. So like there are ways to mitigate it. But I think the relationship with Brandt has the potential to be special, because I think they kind of understand the game the same way. Their movement, their vision, I think, is very similar. But I am curious as to whether, or what Şahin does, whether he pairs him, whether he allows him to go forward, whether he has a double pivot behind him, maybe there's 3. It's a big decision. I just hope, like I said, that he's put in a position where his strengths can come to the fore, and you're not asking him to do too many things. As I mentioned earlier, this guy could play right back. He could play right midfield. He could play false 9. He could play, he's got so many skills, but don't be fooled by that. Like, look at what he's at, what his best skill set is. And that's in the middle. It's playmaking. It's making his teammates come to the fore more. It's the Hollywood pass, but it's also the smart pass in a complicated situation. It's composure. Don't ask him to do 25 things when he could do 15 really, really well. So I hope Şahin does that, but big decisions for sure.
Yeah, it's tricky because I feel like ideally you want to have a more number 6-ish oriented midfielder next to Pascal Groß in order to highlight the strengths we've talked about. The connective player in the team. I mean, someone who Nuri Şahin himself was. Is best paired with someone like Sven Bender.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's say.
Yeah.
And obviously Emre Can has these qualities, and I think the less Emre Can does and focuses on, simplifying the game for himself, the better he plays. But I also know that Emre Can does not see himself like such a player. I feel like only in sort of high-profile Champions League games, more or less, you can convince Emre Can to sort of reduce his game to a more limited role. But I feel like in a regular league match, he tries to take on more responsibility than is necessary, which is also why him being the club's captain is a complicated issue.
Yes.
But I don't want to go on that tangent. Now, Felix Metscher obviously has struggled with injuries, but also at the same time, when he played for Dortmund, he has offered very little. As the connective piece, he has offered very little as a player that looked like he wanted to play professional football, meaning he just looked very lazy out there, very, very disengaged, very disinterested. And that obviously is very disheartening for a player you paid, I think, 30 million euros for, and, arrived here with a lot of controversy and split the fan base just because of previous social media posts. And, I've talked to a lot of people when I was in Dortmund, and they were really unhappy, sort of from the ultra scene, that were really unhappy that Dortmund even made this transfer, because they said he will eventually leave, but the decision of signing him will stay here. And obviously it's a make or break season for Metscher, and I don't know how he is going to be paired up, but he's obviously a player that would, when he's paired up with Pascal Groß, usually also be more on the number 8 slot, meaning Pascal Groß then would probably more play as a number 6, as I've lined it up. And Charlie Özcan sadly is also really not finding his form in Dortmund. Maybe paired up with Pascal Groß, Özcan could be sort of coming out of this as the winner. Or maybe we'll see a 3-man midfield with Sabitzer and Brandt in front of Pascal Groß as the anchor. For now, it feels like an imperfect puzzle where you're excited about someone like Pascal Groß coming in, but then you look on, sort of the team sheet and on paper, and I worry that maybe, as you said, the strengths of Pascal Groß may not be entirely highlighted just because of the players around him in immediate midfield. But like you also said, Julian Brandt, for example, could be the major beneficiary. I also think that someone like Adeyemi, who, even though his finishing is much maligned, I think makes a lot of smart, intelligent runs. We did see it in the Champions League final. He did get that 1-on-1 chance with the keeper. He obviously fluffed it, but nevertheless, he did get at the end of that. Daniel Malen, I think, really has established himself as a really good player too, hampered by injuries, but nevertheless, I think when it comes to wingers and attacking midfielders, Dortmund are really fine, and obviously they still have to figure out the striker situation, but overall, I'm not really worried about that scenario either. So, yeah, really, I think Dortmund overall have a really good team built. I think the fullback positions, maybe the left back position is the only major concern, and then whoever is to be paired up next to Pascal Groß. But I agree with you. I'm just looking at the profile that he brings to the table, and like you said, the experience and just, being someone that runs hard, that presses well, and I think this is somewhere where Dortmund wants to get back to, is going to be invaluable. So I have him on my starting lineup sheet as of right now. So
yeah, definitely. And I also think that hard-working perspective is always well received in Dortmund. Like that will come across well. And I honestly, maybe that there's also a hope given his age. You mentioned Mecha there. Personally, I don't think Felix Mecha has much of a future at Borussia Dortmund. I don't think he has shown enough of a reason to be starting. But maybe there's a possibility here that Pascal Groß can mentor a player in that position. And the hope is that even if in 2 years, where Groß is coming towards the end of his career, then Mecha has at least learned something, and he can maybe take a step or two forward and become the player that Borussia Dortmund were hoping he was when they signed him. There's, that possibility is also there. I mentioned earlier that Pascal Groß has had a great effect on Brighton players. So there's definitely some leadership qualities there, some mentoring possibilities there that Dortmund will hope can work for them as well. But it's definitely, I like that, an imperfect puzzle. He's definitely got to get it right, because I think it would be a big mistake to sign someone like this at the end of their career, and for his career to be like, oh yeah, those 2 seasons at Dortmund, but no one remembers. I don't want that for him, because he's actually had a phenomenal career when you think about it. Like at Ingolstadt, he was one of those like under the radar players in the Bundesliga, and look at him, he's really good. He's really good. He then went on to be a legendary player for a Premier League team. Played so well that he got into Germany squads for home Euros, and that secured him a transfer to his home club, like his boyhood dream, right? Like what a career. Let's not let this last bit be spoiled. Yeah. It's a tough one. I hope not, because as a fan, obviously very grateful for so many memories.
I mean, if it's as the baseline goes as well, let's say, as Oliver Kirch joining Dortmund, because there are similarities. Obviously, he was not as big of a legend beforehand at this previous team. He was obviously more of a role player, but nevertheless, he had huge performances. I mean, everyone will remember him outplaying the Real Madrid midfield. He was just crucial in coming in, being that connective piece in many ways, and just being someone that people remember for the way he held himself at Dortmund as a player and just as a person. So I assume if Pascal Groß manages at least that, and I think it's probably going to be more, then he will be fine. Yeah, I'm pretty much out of things to talk about Pascal Groß. Jonathan, are there any other Dortmund-related things you want to talk about before we knock it on the head?
I'm curious that if Niklas Füllkrug leaves, what that means for Borussia Dortmund's strikers. You said it wasn't really a concern of yours. I think I would be concerned. Not that I think Füllkrug is so great. I think he's very good at what he does. But I also think that Niklas Füllkrug, the person, is a big plus for a dressing room, for a locker room. And I think that loss would be big, I think.
No, you're absolutely right. I think undoubtedly he has established himself as a really key person in the locker room. I mean, we also saw it during his time playing for Germany at the Euros, that he also became a fan favorite relatively quickly, just because he seems to be a very, I was going to say awake kid. However, he is not that young anymore. But
no, he's down to earth. He's down to earth.
But he's down to earth, and he's also a connective guy in the locker room. He can pretty much deal with everyone around him. And speaking of connective guy, I mean, the reason why, even though he is probably not of the highest international class when it comes to strikers, he is still a very important player because of his back to goal style of play, and also just because he adds something to Guirassy, because he is someone, if you need to just cross the ball into the box and hope someone gets to the end of it with a header. Now, obviously, Guirassy is also good in the air, but Füllkrug certainly did that. I think the contrast between him and Havertz during the Euros really underscored how valuable he is as just the type of striker he is. So I think you're right there. However, my hope is, and maybe that's stupid to hope, but that Sebastian Aller regains some fitness, because he is a similar archetype, if you will. However, I think he is, when fit and healthy, better at the things he's good at than Niklas Füllkrug. So my hope is that and I think, talking about shrewd business, if Dortmund get offered money for a lot of money from, I think it's West Ham right now, right? For Niklas Füllkrug, after him being sort of an emergency transfer, because they looked at probably the fitness data of Sebastian Aller and realized, okay, we probably can't really bet on him this season. Speaking of last season, so I personally think it would work out quite nice. Obviously, it would be amazing to have Füllkrug still on the roster going into the season, especially with Guirassy still being out for a while. But that being said, if you still have Aller on the books, that's where I'm not worried then, because I think that Aller, given a few games or so, can probably still do a good job and finally score a goal again, because he did that so at the Africa Cup of Nations. I thought he played there pretty well before he picked up an injury. So having a full preseason, I think, would help him. But yeah, it's not an ideal situation, because there are reports that Dortmund have told Aller in so many words that they are not really playing with him from a sporting perspective. Obviously, the ideal scenario for Dortmund would be to go into the season with Guirassy and Füllkrug, because they complement each other so well. But not to the extent where I was going to be really worried about Dortmund's striker situation, because I do think that Guirassy is that good anyway, that he's going to be the undisputed number one striker in the Dortmund system. And then you would ideally have someone like Füllkrug as a backup, who can either come in as a substitute and sort of change the game a little bit, just because of the playing style he represents, but also in the games where Guirassy can play, needs to be load managed, whatever. He is still a very serviceable guy. So yeah, I think it is going to be interesting to see if Dortmund can or will let him go or not. I think Guirassy not being healthy right now is maybe something that disincentivizes them from sort of pulling the trigger on that transfer. But on the other hand, I think Dortmund have a transfer deficit of 50 million this season, and it's not like a lot of clubs are knocking and offering huge amounts of money. I mean, Adeyemi is being rumored to leave for Juventus, but is this going to be a transfer that recoups enough money for Dortmund to be financially sensible, considering the upside that Adeyemi has? Still a player I would rather develop. And if you sell Adeyemi, then do you trust the likes of Bino Gittens and Duranville to make up for that, or do you have to sign then another attacking midfielder? So it's still very tricky off season, and I'm not entirely sure it's going to be all easy going from the get go. But at least as far as Pascal Groß is concerned, I hope that Dortmund have made a genius stroke. And as you said, if it's only going to last, in quotations mark, for 1.5 or 2 seasons, I think that 7 million is not going to be something that hurts Dortmund, honestly. I think it's going to be a net positive either way, even if he retires as a Dortmund player, and they're not going to recoup anything for him.
No, definitely. I think it's a positive for everybody involved. And I think I just hope that in the 2 years that he's there, he's used the right way, played the right way, and that Dortmund, all the other pieces around him, come together, basically, because there's only so many things that he can influence. And I think the important thing for Dortmund fans is also not to expect that Pascal Groß is some sort of savior and is going to come in and fix everything and be amazing. I think he solves a big problem, but so long as he's put in the position to do that, and then there are all the other pieces that we've talked about that still need solving. So I think he's a great signing for adding a little bit of stability at a time when there's a lot of transition, like you said at the top of the show. And I hope you get the best of him, and I'm excited to watch him because, I've had the pleasure of watching him very regularly over the last few years. And I think he's a fantastic player, and I just hope he can show it.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you. You can follow Jonathan on Twitter still at JohnBlock66, since the English national team is not winning anything. Hasn't come home yet. But
no, it'll be 66 forever, I'm sure. But thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, and everyone out there, as always, thank you for listening. Until next time, goodbye.